Okay, we are live. Every single time we do one of these things, and I had Doug watching on YouTube. I was sharing my screen with him. Every single time, Google changes it, and so I had to go back to their stupid. They had like some beta version of this thing, and I had to go revert back to the original one, and then we were able to make it work. So Google, quit changing crap and let it be for a little bit. And that way we don't have to, every time we do one of these things, we have to figure it out. So Doug's here. And Fighton will be here shortly, hopefully. I just sent him the link and there he is. And
hey guys.
Hey, so hey, we're live. We're seeing that we're live. If anyone's watching, if you can just give us a little thumbs up so we're sure that we've got some audience interaction. And also Sinetek will hopefully be here. I sent him the invitation as well. And this is a pretty big hangout because in the past we've talked about just certain things that and progress and on how things are moving forward. On this particular one, we've got some pretty big topics to discuss. And I guess without further ado, I'll let Doug kind of touch on some of the big things you guys have been discussing with Verium and what are the benefits of these proposed changes and how do you see about them being implemented if in fact if the community feels it's best?
Yeah, sure. So I think how we'll work it regarding the detailed discussion is I'll give an overview of what we're going to discuss, and then Fighton is going to talk about a number of the details in the Verium implementations that I'm going to mention, and also if Sinetek comes on, he can be the one to give us the core update for Verium, as he's been heading that up and doing a really nice job. But a long story short is the core update for Verium, which is basically taking proof of work time, the Verium, and the mining algorithm together with the kinetics of block dynamics, which is basically proof of work time protocol, has been ported onto the 0.16 version of the Bitcoin blockchain code base, which is what we're based off of. So it comes with a lot of improvements under the hood and above the hood, and that the core implementation is complete under the hood and above the hood. And we heard someone, and then
I actually, sorry about that. I was closing some of my tabs and I went to the tab with the video, so you heard yourself talking for a minute. Sorry.
Oh, okay. I sound weird then. So we're gonna so basically the core the Verium protocol port into the Bitcoin core code base update is complete. Sinetek is working on the front end. If he comes on, he'll discuss some details, and then we're going to talk also about changing the fee schedule for Verium because it was set very high, a 0.2 minimum Verium fee, which is 20, kind of like a 20% per Verium fee. Now that doesn't actually mean it's 20% of whatever the total amount you're sending is. It can be 0.2 for almost any amount of Verium if it's all coming from a few number of transactions. But we have determined that the fee is, in my opinion at least, and ultimately we want to have a community vote on this, that the fee is exceedingly high, especially now that we're not in the launch stage of Verium, where it actually has a value and so on. That's a market value that's meaningful. And Fighton's going to talk a bit about the details of what we think might be the best fee change approach. This would be basically dropping the fee in half and allowing about twice as many inputs per fee. And we think that there's also some other details related to it, but there's a couple of reasons why we want to do this. One is we don't want liquidity to be too low, and a 0.2 fee for cryptocurrencies is quite high. There is higher fees, but it's quite high, especially considering the supply of Verium. So we don't want to inhibit liquidity too much. We do want to continue to maintain Verium as a store of value and inhibit its use as just, like a trading speculative, hyper liquid, valueless thing. We want to preserve its role as the reserve in the binary chain, but we don't want to inhibit too much liquidity. The other thing is when we have, what we're working really now on in terms of getting Verium out to people is enabling the average everyday person to do a one-click mining on Verium, either via mobile or via desktop or what have you, get a frequent payout, which we'll discuss. Regarding frequent payouts, we'll discuss the mining share implementation. And we also want them to be able to send their small amount of coins that they might be mining on an ARM device, which Verium happens to be the most efficient, as far as I know, mining algorithm for ARM devices, which includes phones, tablets, single board computers, and so on. We want people to be able to send the coins without expending too much of their mined earnings doing that. But we will ultimately, it'll be a protocol change. So we will set up a vote when we get to that point. And people can vote no change, or they can, and we'll have probably a couple alternatives that we think make sense, that the community thinks makes sense. And then so we'll talk about that. And then the other thing that we'll discuss, Fighton and I will discuss, and Fighton as well, is how we're going to implement this basically on-chain, decentralized mining pool type infrastructure. So Fighton and I have been thinking about this for a while and have had some disagreements about the way we thought it should go. And we've been talking to the community, and some people like it, some people don't. Long story short is we had this long discussion and we figured some cool stuff out with how we can implement it in an optional way, so that for instance, as a pool operator, Fighton doesn't have to handle his user shares and all these mining shares coming in from solo miners, but a solo miner can have the ability to get frequent payouts at the same time. So we think we've figured out that problem. And actually there's this really interesting tweet thread from Bram Cohen, who is one of the main developers of the original BitTorrent software. And he's also in the crypto space and has been for a while. He had this, I retweeted his tweet, I think it was today or yesterday, but he went into this, some interesting points to consider regarding mining decentralization. And he actually brought up that probably the only real solution is to have some sort of decentralized on-chain P2 pool-like mechanism. And that's exactly what we've been working on for, I would say, over a year now, figuring out. So we've got that mostly figured out and ready to start implementing on the core Verium update. And then we're also going to talk about some possible ways that Verium holders can earn VeriCoin revenue on the binary chain. Different people in the community have had ideas about this. A lot of people think it makes sense. It would require some protocol changes to implement it. So we would also put that to a vote. But the point being that there isn't really a great incentive to hold the reserve currently in the incentive scheme for the binary chain, which we could add as part of a binary chain feature. Now, the one thing that I'll note in this whole context is the binary chain, for those that don't know, is basically a bridge that we're building between two separate protocols, one being a currency and one being the reserve. They have a supply peg that's live in the code and is we're creeping towards it day by day. And as Verium is catching up to the supply ratio with VeriCoin. And so we can get out of the binary chain, we can get attributes of a currency and attributes of a reserve with two separate protocols that then work together to leverage the strengths of each. So that's the overall scope of the project, where we basically build this mini economy on top of this currency reserve system. Now, one interesting and really fun thing is that when the binary chain is implemented, then, which will happen after both core updates are complete, and we're getting near that point, then we can create data exchange between nodes that are on the networks of both chains. Because when you have the binary chain wallet running, you will, by default, have both chains be synced with both chains. And we're going to make it possible for you to pass data between nodes on either the VeriCoin chain or the Verium chain or across chains. And this data can be used for all kinds of things that doesn't require a protocol change, which is the nice thing. It would just be updates to the wallet that handle ease of functionality for sharing smart contracts that enable P2P exchanges. So initially, I would like to start off with simple smart contracts that are basically exchanges between two people. One has VeriCoin, one has Verium, and they want to swap at an agreed upon price that they decide. We can enable this in the data transfer layer between the two chains, and many other things can be enabled without any protocol changes of either VeriCoin or Verium. So in the process of setting up the mining shares and setting up the binary chain, we will go into a phase where we basically stop protocol changes for the most part, aside from updates, security updates, maybe some minor changes or significant changes that happen rarely that we decide make sense. But for the most part, we can then start using the data layer between the two chains and doing all kinds of building on top of that, where we have a protocol that can leverage efficient currency transactions, a protocol that can leverage store of value, and we can use both of these strengths together to as in a bridge, and basically the real goal is to build a microeconomy in this system, and of course bridge it to the greater economy as well. So that's a quick overview of everything we're going to discuss. Maybe I can pass it off to Phyton, and he can pick the things that I mentioned, which he'd like to talk about first.
Yeah, let's send me a link to the chat real quick.
Once he's off mute.
So, yeah, I would think I will start with a fee schedule, as it's probably the most quick to explain.
Basically,
yeah,
he's talking. Yeah, you don't hear him?
I don't hear him for some reason.
Okay. So, but you hear me, Kevin, right?
Yeah, I hear you fine.
Okay, perfect. I think the chat will hear me as well, so I just will go on while Doug fixes his whatever. So the fee schedule will be probably 4 times lower than the current fee. So we will decrease the fee, the base fee, from 0.2 Verium to 0.1 Verium, and will increase the amount of inputs per 0.1 Verium to 10, from 5 to 10. So we will have we will have a 100 times higher fee than VeriCoin in terms of actual 1-by-1 coin. If we assume the 1-to-10 ratio of VeriCoin and Verium, we are 1,000 times higher fees than VeriCoin, which is perfectly fine in my eyes, and it's still per input. Also, we will change the first cent after mining thing. It's pretty difficult to explain. It means that we later or after this change can offer a payout to your wallet after each block. That means the pools don't have to store that high amount of coins. So the trust required in pool admins can decrease, which is always a good thing. And it means for you as a solo miner, after you mine a block, you can send it for free to an exchange, to another address, or wherever you like. The first send is free. After then, the normal fees apply. And which means basically we have a lower fee, and we can provide payouts to your personal secured wallet way more often and way more frequently, making everything more decentralized, as coins doesn't be stored in bigger pools. So yeah.
Yeah. So can I just kind of interrupt and just kind of, from my perspective, just break that down into like the end benefit? And essentially, you guys have mentioned it, but people that are mining, I mean, one of the goals with Verium is, and it being a CPU, is all about decentralization. So we want someone to be able to start mining Verium with technically their smartphone or a laptop they already have. So they don't have to actually put capital investment to start mining. But at the same time, they're going to be getting, we're called the micro miners, right? And so if we're waiving that first transaction fee, that makes it more practical and viable. That's how I look at it.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
So it basically, when you transfer to this, Duck, you're in the wrong chat, by the way. You have to open the YouTube chat. The Hangouts chat is not transferred to YouTube, so just for your heads up. So yeah, basically, which means that even if your mobile phone just gets shares in a pool, as example, like let's say 1K Satoshi as each block, we could pay you out at each block for free, and you would get you won't have to accumulate a decent amount, which would take for SBCs or mobile phones quite long, especially when the overall network hash is way higher than now. So you won't have to mine like 6 months to have your first payout. So yeah. Kevin, you're muted.
So I muted it. All right. So that to me, that solves a pretty big problem. And then, as Doug mentioned too, when we talk about taking the fee down from 0.2 to 0.1, you know, one of the other things that we've noticed was, and Doug mentioned it, liquidity. So you're not going to get a lot of trading on exchanges when you've got 0.2. So reducing that fee down will help in that regard as well. So I think both of these decisions, and I don't know if when you're talking about voting and moving forward, how this is all going to be packaged. You know, is there going to be a vote to say, okay, reduce the fee from 0.2 to 0.1, and that's a separate thing? Or is it going to be reduce the fee from 0.2 to 0.1 plus first send or first transaction after it's been minted, there's no fee on that end. So if my opinion is, if both of those things are collective, you're really helping the situation in a holistic way, because it makes more sense for people to mine. And so you got more people familiar with Verium because it's easy to mine it. That should help the liquidity issue too. And then what we saw with like Bittrex delisted us Verium because of low trading volume. So I think both of these things contribute to this, and I think this is a pretty big change in the protocol. But I don't see the downside, honestly. I don't know who would make an argument against both of these things. But again, it is a community type of decision. But is there any negatives that you guys have discussed on both of those two aspects?
No.
So I can comment. I could drop a quick comment. I think, the negative is of dropping the fees at all is that there's going to be less fee revenue for the miners. But the reality is that as the inflation rate drops in parity with VeriCoin, the only practical, in my opinion, solution is to drop the fee structure. It was initially set artificially high to preserve it as a reserve, and now that it has a value that can go up considerably, it's not necessary to be that high. So there will be less fee revenue for the miners. However, there's another counterpoint to that if the transaction fees are lower, there might be more transactions. So it's possible that it actually has the inverse effect and actually increases the net rewards earned from fees by miners, which would kind of be the approach. Like that would be the idea. So I think we should have a vote that kind of does, you have the 0.1 drop, you have the 0.1 drop plus additional transactions per 0.1 fee, and then you also have an option for that plus the first send is free, and kind of a combination of all of the above. As long as there's not too many options where the vote is like, not unanimous for one solution. But other than that, I think it makes sense to have a few options, from most conservative to most aggressive change. But in the end, we're really still talking about a pretty significant fee being maintained. And I missed part of what Phyton was saying, but it's on the order of 100 times more expensive than VeriCoin and so forth in any of these implementations we're talking about.
Yeah. So basically, my opinion is that we need this first gen free to achieve our goal of mobile miners. Without the first gen free, we won't have mobile wallet mining in that way, as we can't provide frequent payouts, and people won't mine 6 months straight ahead to get their first payout. It's just not possible. So I think we don't need a real big vote to make changes which are better for everyone, as no one gets hurt in this system. The security will be the same, so I don't see any downside to it. There was a question in chat when the fee change will happening. I talked with Doug about the schedule of this. We found that the core update with the new wallet will be the best way, as the old wallet will not accept the new lower fee. So or the old core, old client, will not accept lower fees, but the new core will accept higher fees. So we have an upwards compatibility. Gosh. But it won't be possible to have transactions from the new core wallet to an old core wallet.
Yeah, so I can comment on that. So basically, so if there's a unanimous support for a fee change in the vote, then the time that makes the most sense to add it is when most people are going to update. And by far the biggest update we've had actually since Verium launched is this core update. So it makes sense to it's a simple change in terms of code, and it would go live on a future block after the release, and so it makes sense to have the change go live with the update so that almost everyone updates around the same time. Now, what Fighton said is true. Because this is a fee drop, that means that if a new wallet is trying to send a fee that's lower than 0.2, the old wallet will reject it. So this would need to basically be done in a manner where we give a sufficient time period for people to update to the new wallet before the fee change happens. Now, obviously, if you send a 0.2 fee, then that'll be accepted by all nodes because it's higher than the minimum. But anything lower than the old minimum would not be accepted by the old wallet. So we would need basically just to give time to people. But what would happen is people would fall out of sync with the network if there's a small fraction of people on the old chain. We're obviously not doing this if it's controversial, but if there's a small fraction of people on the old chain, they would fall out of sync with the network because they're not obeying the same rules, and they would just need to update their wallet, and everything would be fine. But because it is a rule change, we will need to do it in an orderly fashion, and during the core update makes the most sense.
Yeah.
Okay. And unfortunately, I was hoping Sinetek was going to be.
Kevin, I believe you're. Oh wait.
Am I muted?
No,
you're good.
You're fine.
It was me again. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to say. So you mentioned the timing of this. If it's the consensus of the community is in favor, would relate with the core update. And I wanted to. The goal was to have Sinetek on the call. I know earlier in the week he had a sore throat, and then he had a pretty hectic day today, almost fried his computer or something. But he's basically been doing the lion's share of the core update in the past month and a half. Is that or 2 months maybe?
He actually has led the entire core update. I've done some development on it, but he led it.
Yeah, and I guess we should say about a month and a half ago, or maybe it was 2 months. I don't know the exact time frame, but he basically has gone full time with that because it is such a integral piece of our whole all the plans that we have, and almost everything moving forward is dependent on the core update. So he's been busting his butt, and there's been a lot of progress. And we've got Verium pretty much done. There's some front end aspects that are still being fine tuned. And then it's off to updating with VeriCoin, which shouldn't take that long because. And Doug, you can elaborate more than me, but it's essentially just some small changes specific to the protocol. And is that right? Or
yeah. So So we've done this sequentially on purpose, not just because we like doing one thing at a time. We've done it sequentially because basically VeriCoin and Verium live on the same blockchain code base, which is the Bitcoin blockchain code base, and they have their own unique protocols. So in effect, I mean, for the most part, it's not this simple, but it's kind of as simple as VeriCoin and Verium share actually the same hashing algorithm. It's just Verium has a different parameter set for CPU mining, and VeriCoin has a different parameter set for staking. So they actually share the same hashing algorithm, and with a parameter change. And then there's basically, it's not this simple, but it's almost this simple. There's basically one file of code that's different between them. One handles the POW protocol, and one handles the proof of stake time protocol. So it's a tiny percentage of changes that need to be done once we have one of them moved up to the core update. So yeah, once the UI is like ready to roll, it doesn't even have to be totally complete, but basically ready to use. We'll then start working on the POST implementation in the core code base. So I expect them to come one after the other, not too far apart. And like Kevin said, we're on the UI phase, which is basically it's not complicated. It's just a matter of getting it to be nicely usable. So we're getting quite close.
And I think we've got a good starting point already with our existing wallets, but
yeah,
the new one visually, I mean, there's been different iterations of it, but you know, I contributed a couple thoughts at some point, and really it's just thinking about the logical placement of certain things. And when you're on like when I first, the first wallet I think I downloaded when I got involved with this project with VeriCoin, I remember there was probably 30% of the bottom screen had almost like a price chart. And yeah, it's relevant, but it didn't, not really, not on a wallet. You know, when I'm going to my wallet, I'm looking at, you know, I want to see how, what's most important typically is sending and receiving, mostly checking a balance. With VeriCoin, you want to be able to maybe see what the interest rate is. So we really thought through like prioritizing what the user really needs. But we've got a good start. I mean, I think our wallet's one of the better ones that I've seen already anyway. And now we're just trying to make it better. And then when we get to Gemini and the combined wallet, there's already been, I think, some pretty nice aesthetics and thought processes on how we're going to handle having both Verium and VeriCoin within one installation. So it's one of these things where work's being done, but it takes a while for some things to actually hit. It happens a lot with my business too, with internet marketing. There's a lot of like blocking and tackling behind the scenes things. It's not always just the pretty, the ad that we put out. A lot of the research and things that go in advance that the client never actually sees. That kind of work is actually really valuable. And I feel like with this project especially, there's a lot of stuff that's happening that you can't really show. It's hard for people to visualize it, but it's as important or more important than sometimes just the release of like a wallet or something.
Yeah, I mean, on that note, I'll just say like one example, which I often use, which is when I was working on the Verium protocol. It wasn't just me, but it was largely me at that time. And I spent basically 2 years designing it. and then I did most of the development, and I spent about 2 to 3 months implementing it. So, and that, I mean, at the end of the day, we're not looking to copy other people. We have our own approach. We're not reinventing the wheel. We're using Bitcoin's blockchain, but we have our own approach for a lot of other things. And that, I think right now that also includes the mining share implementation, which maybe me and Fighton can lead into now, because after making a CPU mined coin, I've come to the conclusion that how important, now you can have a device that anyone has, almost everyone has a computer, and even more people have a smartphone or a free smartphone in the world, even beyond first world. So you can imagine like an algorithm that is efficient on an ARM device being in the hands of billions of people, and they have an opportunity to earn money by using their device and securing the network. And what has become clear to me over the last few years is how absolutely important the frequency of payout is to people who are mining. And although any device really could mine Verium, if they're not going to get a reward within a day, they're probably going to just stop shortly after starting. And the problem, and that is solved, that problem has been solved previously in all currencies, POW currencies, with pools. It solves the problem. The problem with pools solving that problem is they become a new central point of failure. And we're working, Fighton has been heading up how we decentralize regular pools more and more, and we've been strategizing on this. And this can be improved, but at the end of the day, if you're removing a direct incentive for someone to participate as an independent person directly on the network, you're losing a lot of consensus power that you could otherwise have. And so rather than implement a separate P2 pool network, which actually we were working on for a while and realized it's not practical and doesn't really work, and all the reasons why P2 pool is not dominant, Fighton and I in particular have figured out how to implement a P2 pool like system, which basically counts people's hashes on the main network, with a caveat being that we will have an additional port. This is like technical jargon, but basically there's going to be an additional communication layer between nodes on the Verium network that pass hash counts per address. And then this data is going to be used to split blocks on the chain. So basically a node that's solo mining on the Verium network will be transmitting data to other nodes about how much hashing it's been doing that is successful. And that data would be used by other nodes that are sharing this data to split block rewards proportionally among all those nodes that are sending the data. Now, this is the technical, like the quick technical overview. But in reality, what it means is that we can make it such that with no central party, someone can click mine on their phone and get a fraction of a block within a day from the chain directly, participating as a node, as a full node even. And no one's done this, no one's achieved this goal. And as I said in the beginning, Bram Cohen reiterated, and there's rumors that he's one of the main developers of one of the main coins. I don't want to get into that, but needless to say, he knows what he's talking about. He mentioned it. It's really the only solution to this problem. Now we have a situation. The other thing that Bram Cohen mentioned in this tweet thread is that there is a tax that can occur between pools, where basically if you have enough hash power, it's a version of selfish mining. If you have enough hash power, you can mine on a pool, on an adversarial pool. You can find the block hash, but not actually propagate it on that pool. So, and then you can siphon your share of the rewards along the way, and then propagate the actual block hash on your own pool or your preferred pool. Long story short is these are not real heavy concerns, but at this point, but as mainstream comes more and more into crypto, and Facebook is creating a coin. Obviously, this is the new news, but that means that big corporations are going to start getting into this stuff, which means big corporations are probably also going to start mining, and so on and so forth. And that is an order of magnitude change in the amount of infrastructure that can be put into these things. So we need to have as many players in the consensus as possible. I still want to have pools. I'm not against pools. I'm not anti-pools. I just don't want there to be an extra incentive to be on pools compared to being on the main network. And there will certainly be a continued need for pools. But if we can keep the consensus decentralized as much as possible via mind sharing, then I think we make ourselves a lot more strong and flexible going into the future as I think massive amounts of people come into the space. But you want to follow up on that too?
Yeah, I can do this. I just want to say something about how we are working. So I just came back like an hour ago at home, so I can be on the stream. But I did some drawings before. I tried to share it. I don't know if it works. At least it says I'm screen sharing. So this is the last drawing I did. It's like the third or the fourth drawing I did on this mining shares thing, and as you see, it's quite complicated. We have solo miners, we have pools, we have two networks, and all we are doing is like theoretically at the moment. We are not even programming. We are just finding a way which is secure for everyone and future-proof. So things takes time, and I know people are how to say people want to have deadlines. We can't give deadlines because things can happen when they happen. So this is like the fourth drawing because the first three were thrown away because we found bugs and security issues in it, and we are still like this part on the left is pretty clear. We have solo miners which communicating over a second layer for to make like a decentralized database where each one is placing its shares like peer-to-pool. But the difficult thing here is how do we secure that one miner, when he's submitting a block to the Verium network, isn't faking that he has done like 100% of the work, even if all the three miners in this example submitted work to the underlying mining shares network. So we are still determining the security base here. This is another approach I did today. Like the block submitted from the mining shares network includes the number of addresses in the mining shares table, and at least 51%, like same approach as we have in the normal network. 51% of the miners from the mining shares network need to submit this block with their hash, and all the other pools and other solo miners which are not mining on the mining shares network still can see we have like 3 addresses in the in the mining shares table, and they see that they receive 2 blocks with the same transactions and the same reward scheme, basically, for the different addresses, and they haven't received the 3rd block, but it's still more than 51% of the mining shares network, which is 3 addresses. So we have 66% of the consensus. So my pool, which doesn't know any mining shares from the mining shares network, still can prove that these blocks are correct. This is like 1 hour old or 1.5 hours old, this drawing, and it wasn't discussed with Doug at the moment. So this is like a pre-release of anything, just to so you guys see how difficult some development is really. So coming back to the mining shares.
I'll just add one interesting note to that. Is one thing that we figured out a few days ago, or last week, I can't remember what it was, but is that we can, there's the implementation, there's the design, and then there's how exactly it's implemented. But one thing that is really cool, I think, is we can have a mining share network that doesn't lose the network effect of Verium, because the same nodes that are on the Verium network, if they decide to participate in the mining share network, basically they would by default. For instance, if they're solo miners, most likely, I mean, that'll probably be how we set it up. But nodes on the Verium network can activate the mining share port. It would be a different communication port. And we maintain the network effect of Verium because it's actually largely the same nodes. And they just opt in or out of this extra communication layer. And ultimately, I think, interestingly, in the binary chain, it'll work like this as well, where the binary chain wallet will have 2 blockchains. Each blockchain has its own port. Then there will be a mine sharing port. And then there will be, and this is the communication channel. Basically, these ports are communication channels through the internet for data. So there would be a Verium port, a VeriCoin port, a mining share port, and then a data port, as I briefly mentioned before. But the cool thing about these types of implementations, where it's built into the wallet and we're just adding additional ports for different types of data transfer, that's optional, is we maintain the network effect of VeriCoin and Verium. We actually bring the network effect of both Verium and Verium together and leverage it towards mindshare data, towards other types of data, such as exchange data, and so on and so forth. So although on the picture that Phyton showed, it's 2 separate networks, in reality, it's actually the same network with different communication channels, open or closed, between nodes. So it's quite cool. There's so much that we can do with it. It's very versatile.
Doug, you mentioned too, as like a really simplistic smart contract in the sense of being able to exchange Verium for VeriCoin and vice versa. And obviously, the world of smart contracts it's open to creativity. But are there any other, maybe potential, like, simple examples of a smart contract that you think, just to let people's imaginations run a little bit, maybe some things that you think would be practical that could be implemented pretty easily?
Yeah. So, well, first off, I will say that smart contracts are in their infancy, and most of them are garbage. Most of the implementations of smart contracts these days are just not secure, not done well. The languages themselves for complex smart contracting is still being developed, basically. So there's a big debate about how exactly it should be done. Many different thoughts about this. There's a couple projects that are really pushing forward. I personally think Tezos is one of the better ones in the way that they're implementing it. But in my opinion, smart contracting is not ready for prime time at this point. However, however, the technology itself, the ability to make agreements digitally with digital signatures over the internet is almost limitless. I mean, basically any legal, it's not just this, but any, for instance, legal thing could be done. So ownership of actual physical property and all these types of things. Exchanges themselves could be smart contracts, and where there's co-ownership of coins and so on and so forth, where there's no intermediary. Basically, first of all, an exchange really should be in a smart contract with its users, but in reality, the users don't even need the exchange if that's possible. And that's really what we're working on ultimately for our smart contracting approach. For instance, I think if you can't do a P2P trade with a smart contract, then you can't do smart contracts, right? That's like, it's basically the next step from Bitcoin, is doing a decentralized person-to-person trade with smart contracting. It's 2 transactions. It's totally in the wheelhouse of regular cryptocurrency technology. If that's not happening, then real smart contracts are not there. So to me, that's the first thing to do, and it can be done. It's not easy, but it can be done. So that's one of the things I want to work on. But one of the other things that I think that we could do, which is pretty straightforward, and other people have done, which is, I guess it's a little easier. Actually, it is easier. Is voting. You can basically vote with a stake. So you can sign a vote with a signature from a key that has coins. So you can have a staked vote. That could be, in our case, in the form of Verium, VeriCoin, or a combination. You could, of course, have non-staked votes, free votes, but then those can be gamed, so they're not really practical. But to me, if you can make decisions and you can trade person to person, I mean, then everything else just opens up. I mean, an entire economy can be run almost via smart contracting. We're a ways off from that being a reality, but yeah, I mean, I honestly have. I want to get the basic things done right, and in our system, in our microeconomy between the 2 chains, and then go from there. But I think what's actually going to happen is once smart contracting is done in niche cases like what I'm talking about, then I can't even imagine right now what ultimately will be done with it. But we're nowhere near that point yet in terms of crypto in general. But it's going to start happening. I think it'll be interesting. For instance, if Facebook, I mean, first of all, it's Facebook coin is a stable coin, so it's it's like basically a crypto fiat alternative, like Tether is. So it's not the same, but if they actually go transition to a permissionless system like they say they are, then they would have a permissionless stable coin, which would be really nice to the extent that it can be, which is debatable. But they're also going to be working on different types of transactions. All this doesn't really matter. What really matters is it's happening. Like this, on a grand scale, this process is now moving forward in a significant way. So it's honestly hard for me to imagine what can be done because there's so much.
Yeah, and you're right. In the grand scheme of things, and I kind of talk about the singularity a lot and how technology and things progress at like excessive speeds. If you think back just even 5 years ago, till where we are right now, it's really night and day difference. It doesn't seem like it because we've been in it, but if you really look back to what, I mean, I feel like in 2014, it was still this idealistic goal of what cryptocurrency is supposed to be. And to some extent, it still is an idealistic goal because I think when you look at crypto as a whole, you've got a large chunk of it that has nothing to do with the tradition, with the ideals and what I think like what we're about and Bitcoin and a few other projects. But I mean, it is real now. I mean, you can't turn on the news without hearing about crypto. And when I see that, it kind of gives me some hope. And you know, I'm obviously an idealistic person. I've had people in the community tell me that I'm idealistic. And the thing is, I don't want to be any other way. I mean, that's why I'm involved in this, because I believe in the ideals of what it's supposed to represent, and I want to fight for what those are. So, but either way, you're right. It's the progress that's happened in the last 5 years is pretty incredible.
Yeah, there was actually, I'll just say this one thing, and then maybe we can move on to the next topic and I guess finish up soon. But I made I think a good tweet today, but I actually want to read it because I don't remember exactly what I said, but I think it's important related to what you just said, and that is the primary effect Bitcoin will have on mainstream economic understanding is that humans deciding inflation schedules is an underhanded tax on the people, which can't be unlearned. And I think basically what that speaks to is the Pandora's box that's being opened right now, which is we don't actually have to live in a world where a handful of people decide how much our money is going to be worth based on how much they take value out of it via printing more for themselves. And, you know, this is in my opinion, it's probably the biggest thing since the Industrial Revolution, because it's as though our monetary system is still a monarchy, is still monarchical or oligarchical, and it's been that way because it's hard to take the powers that be out of control of something that everyone needs to survive.
Right.
And I think to take the control away, and it actually can't be done really practically by another government. For instance, you know, it happens in all countries, including ours, where there's some sort of monetary competition, and boom, ultimately it results in a leader being dethroned or by another country or being assassinated, or all these types of things. I mean, this is, in reality, this is how the money system tends to work. And so the only solution to this problem was really a technological one, I think, that grew from the ground up to enable a total reformation of the system. And as people get Facebook coin, you know, they're going to start to think about what it is that they have. What did they just get? And they're going to start to think about what inflation is, what Bitcoin is, what VeriCoin is, and all these other things. And I think, you know, it's one of the most important periods in human history, in my opinion.
I agree, and we're lucky to be part of it. Not just from like an audience standpoint, but I think everyone involved right now at this stage is active for the most part. I mean, whether you've just invested in crypto, at this stage, still you're a participant, and you're helping to make this change a reality. So yeah, I think we can wrap it up. There's just maybe a couple like house cleaning notes I want to make sure I get out really quick. And one being, I'll put out a message on Blockfolio probably tomorrow, and put something on the website as well. If you're watching, if you have Verium in Bittrex, get it out. We don't know at what point they're going to deny your withdrawals. Bittrex was delisted a couple months ago now. So if you do have anything in there in Bittrex, take it out, put it in your wallet. There's a few small exchanges that you can put it on. And that's a topic of conversation constantly. And I think, we got to mention Will, 23, who's done a tremendous job of kind of acting as community manager. It's not an official title, but he's been very involved, and he busts his butt trying to get different exchanges to be aware of our projects. So the question always is, and a lot of, some of the comments in YouTube right now are related to getting Verium on an exchange. And I agree. I think Verium does probably need a little bit more, some more market penetration. It's just a matter of finding the right situation. But the other thing I'll add on that, and this isn't just about Verium or VeriCoin, but you talk about one of the purposes of an exchange is it kind of serves as an on-ramp for a project. Mm-hmm. Like in most projects, if I want to be involved in whatever it is, I either have to buy it or I have to try to mine it. And in some cases, you pretty much have to buy it. Mm-hmm. And what I see, I always said the best on-ramp, the best way to receive whatever crypto you want is to earn it. Like, get involved with the community, find somebody who has some and say, look, I provide this service, I provide this product. I want to trade for this crypto. But one of the beautiful things, especially since a lot of the things we talked about tonight with Verium, is the on-ramp into both Verium and VeriCoin, to me, just got the foundation even laid even stronger. Because in reality, if we can execute this, the mining shares and the lower fees, and we get to the point where I can literally put my phone on and after a week have a decent amount of Verium to then exchange it for some VeriCoin or keep it as Verium. But that on-ramp, the best on-ramp in the world is to earn it. And that's whether you're mining it or doing, but earning it is the best. And you don't need an exchange for that. No. So I'm hoping that's, big picture, that's where we're going. In the short term though, yes. I'm not gonna say we need to be on another exchange. The liquidity on the exchange we have right now is even light and low. So I'm not a real big believer in, if we get listed on exchange, it gets more visibility and attention. That's just my opinion, but I don't think that is the answer.
I think related to that, I think the crypto community lives in a bubble, and that bubble is largely, at the time being, a speculative market, and they perceive most things from within the bubble, and they think that speculative trading volume correlates with success. Mm-hmm. But actually, it only correlates with success in a tiny niche of a overall market, which actually has real people in it. And so I 100% agree with Kevin. We need exchanges, we need liquidity, we need trading, we need volume. It would be best if all of that is as decentralized as possible. with centralized options as well. But at the end of the day, if people are not acquiring it through the system itself, organically, based on they talked to a friend and the friend said, "Do this, man, and you make a little money. It's so cool." I mean, there's nothing that's more powerful than that. So I think the whole competition to be in a speculative trading dynamic of high volume is just noise. And in the end, we will get that also if we succeed on the real end. And I guess long story short is I've been in the space long enough now and been, heading up a bunch of strategy regarding this project over the years, to the point where I feel like I see the real rubber hitting the road path. And I 100% agree. It's earning, and it's closing the economic loop, which is earning, holding, paying, and the cycle continues. So I think we can actually use crypto community's focus on speculative volume trading as an advantage for ourselves, because everyone's trying to hit this superficial target and expending the resources on it, where while we dig a path out into the mainstream market, when very few projects are focused on that.
Yep. All right. I think. Go ahead, Fighten.
We still have at least one topic left, if I'm not wrong, Doug. We still have the topic to discuss with the incentive to hold Verium. And was there something else, Doug?
I think that's it. I think that's the last thing. Yeah.
Okay. So let me quickly summarize what we discussed like the last 2 weeks. I think a few months ago there was the idea of Verium rewarding or a VeriCoin reward for Verium mining. I had a thought about it quite some nights, and I haven't found any way how this method incentivizes to hold Verium. It basically only incentivizes to mine Verium, but not to hold Verium. So I was thinking about how to make a system which both holds, incentivizes to hold Verium and to mine Verium. And I came up with a pretty neat solution, as Doug and I concluded. We have staking multiplier depending on your amount of Verium you're holding. Means that if you, as example, have 1K Verium, you get a 10% increase in your staking reward on VeriCoin. And this incentivizes mining and holding in two ways. It incentivizes to mine, so you get more Verium to hold, so your payouts in VeriCoin will be higher. This system incentivizes both mining and holding, instead of just giving VeriCoin rewards on mining Verium. I think we will have a vote on this system because it's a quite substantial change in the code as well, as we need some data to be passed around from VeriCoin to Verium and the other way around. And also the Gemini wallet will be necessary for this, because we will need the VeriCoin and Verium on the same address on both networks, so we can have easy verified that the amount of Verium for the VeriCoin multiplier. So I think I have covered everything. Maybe Doug, you have additional points I missed.
Yeah, so I think Fighton brought this up that that Verium has incentives for mining, but not really for holding, and others have brought this up, and it's a very good point, because we are creating cryptocurrency has created currencies, but it hasn't ever created reserves. So we're basically building the incentive infrastructure for the first time, effectively. I mean, people are kind of now starting to poise Bitcoin as a reserve, and maybe that's its ultimate best role. I don't know, but we're right from the start, basically, with this goal, and so we're building this incentive system ourselves, and this I thought was a really good idea. It could potentially be implemented as as part of the auxiliary mining component of the binary chain. It could be implemented in addition to it, and yeah, it would definitely it would take place in a data communication layer. The data would pass for this between the two chains in the Gemini wallet, and the chains would basically interoperate with this data, and the proof associated with the public address of the ownership on both chains and so on. But the cool thing about it is that we would have a vote, and this would be, up for debate and discussion. And this is not happening now. This is something that we would do after the Gemini wallet is released. The cool thing is that we're, in addition to a supply peg, we would also be effectively pegging an income in VeriCoin to a store of value held in Verium, so this could be done. This can be done in the Gemini wallet. There's definitely some things to figure out how it, like Fighton was showing earlier, how it should be done in a secure way. But with the shared addresses, shared keys, shared wallet, it's actually a lot of the work is already done with all that in place. So this is something we should discuss and ultimately vote about when we get closer to it. And I know some have expressed concern that though Verium is a reserve, there's no direct incentive to hold it, whereas with VeriCoin there is, and it's a totally fair point. And I think this is of what I've heard and thought of, I think this is the best solution. Something very similar to this. Yeah, I think that's basically everything we wanted to go through.
Okay. All right, we'll wrap it up then. If you're watching, I know a lot of people weren't able to watch this live. We tried to get to most of the questions on the side in the Hangout, but if you have a question, you can either leave it in the comments and we'll check back on this and try to answer here, or you can enter and join our Slack channel and ask the question there and we will try to answer. So a lot to talk about. We covered a lot today. It's going on about an hour now and 15 minutes. So, all right. And also subscribe to the YouTube channel. That way you get an update anytime we add new videos. I'm going to hope to start doing some non-live Hangout updates as well. A little bit more routine. But that's really dependent on activity and also just information from what the community is looking to hear from. All right, so we'll wrap it up. Everyone have a good weekend, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
See you guys.
Bye.